And he says then in a couple of pages, the page 12 at the bottom, the real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. The guy's a seeker. A seeker is somebody that's been touched by God in such a way that nothing less will ever do. And I'm a seeker. I'm a seeker. My mind goes back to 1966. And I'm so... I was talking to Glenn, when you've been lost, really lost, you never get past the wonder of being found again. Never, never. I'm a seeker. And every seeker needs a master, and you are that, because a master is somebody whose very life bears living witness to the seeker that what the seeker seeks is real. And I saw that here. What I want is real, because you walk that way. So you are my masters, and I am a seeker, and Wilson is a seeker. And he says this, in the cathedral and in these meetings, you know, you sit in the meeting and there's a moment that you're touched. Somebody takes a cake that cannot take a cake, or 60 days, or an act of kindness by somebody that won't do, and it touches me. And I feel good at that moment. And I know I'm in the right place. And I feel so connected that I don't even know I'm connected. I'm just there. Because only my ego needs to know I'm connected. And it's not part of the picture, and so it's just peace. And it may last that long, it may last a minute, it may be. And then by the time the meeting is over and I'm out and I'm in my car and I'm on the freeway, it's gone. It's a drop at a time. I've tasted the honey. I've tasted, and Wilson did. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment I had needed and wanted God. And there had been a humble willingness to have Him with me, and He came. And He came. But soon the sense of His presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. Which is exactly what happened. And so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. So I know that guy's a seeker. And he had another interesting thing. When that guy said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Wilson had another event. He was freed from his own history of disdain about all of that. He was freed from his own history. And the next page he starts thinking amazing thoughts. He's now in Towns Hospital. He's now in Towns Hospital. And he thinks, maybe I should give this to other people. He got in touch with his gift and his talent and made a huge difference for the rest of us. Anyway, we'll start tomorrow morning, and we'll start at whatever time, or 8:30, I guess. But I wanted to start with step 11 tonight because there is a sweet way to get through this day, and there's a tough way to get through it. And this is the easiest thing I have ever lived. And it's possible for me through the steps to go from where I was to what's going on today. Thanks. I'll see you in the morning. Let's start with a moment of silence. And Pat, I always catch you in midstream over there. Your mother and I are worried sick about you, the way you're acting. Let's have a moment of silent meditation and start with the Lord's Prayer, and then we'll go to that tape. And you might, I know you have already, but if you haven't, ask God to direct your thinking. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, I'm going to start a little bit this morning about the traditions. We're not going to stay in it long, but they're important, and sometimes the importance of them gets missed. I have a letter here that was written on December 5th, 1941 in Los Angeles. And that was before the traditions were a part of what we do. And I'll just read you the letter, and you can take your own, make your own conclusions from it. December 5, 1941, Letter is written to Irma. Dear Irma, at a meeting of the Executive Committee to the Los Angeles Group of Alcoholics Anonymous held December 4, 1941, it was decided that your attendance at group meetings was no longer desired until certain explanations and plans for the future were made to the satisfaction of this committee. This action has been taken for reasons which should be most apparent to you. It was decided that, should you so desire, you may appear before members of this committee and state your attitude. This opportunity will be afforded you between now and December 15th, 1941. You may communicate with us at the above address by that date. In case you do not wish to appear, we will consider the matter closed and your membership is terminated. Alcoholics Anonymous Los Angeles Group, and then 6 of the leaders of the day signed off on this letter. I mean, that's how it was. And I thought, when I first read this letter, I thought, I'd have sent a few letters like that myself. And then I realized I would have gotten a few letters like that myself.
Why are you up
What
there?
are...
Well, people out there can't hear.
Oh, they can't?
They say they can't hear you.
All right. There's a... All right, that's going to give it a little volume. All right. Is that better?
Everybody hear that?
And this will explode about what
Yeah,
time
about
today?
8:30 you're going to go. No, it's off our 9:30. It's on.
In 1945, this is out of Pass It On. In 1945, Barry was doing desk duty at the clubhouse on 41st Street. A man came in needing help. He was black, and we had no black members then. He was an ex-convict. He had all his earthly belongings on his back. His hair was bleach blonde. He had on makeup, and he told us he was a dope fiend. We didn't know what to do about the guy. I got together with some of the older members, and we talked to the man and about him and what could we do. When no satisfactory group conscience decision was forthcoming, Barry did what many another AA would have done. He called Bill, to whom he described the prospective member. After a silence, Bill asked Barry to run over the list again, and Barry did that. Now, said Bill, did you say he was a drunk? Oh yeah, there's no question about that. He's certainly a drunk. Well, I think that's about all we can ask, said Bill. The prospect was invited to attend meetings, and although he soon disappeared, his presence created a precedent for the third tradition. Is this some kind of a gag? Are we supposed to run out there and make a curb call now? That's a far-reaching public address system you got there. Have you planned any other disruptions? I'm not even going to judge. I'm not going to get into it. So, the traditions have that importance to them. We really are very fortunate, and the observance of these traditions is a very important thing. It's extraordinarily important. There is a comment that was made in one of the famous legal cases, and it has to do with the right of privacy, but it does what Justice Douglas had to say about the right of privacy applies very much to our traditions in Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, as nightfall does not come all at once, neither does oppression. In both cases there is a twilight when everything remains seemingly unchanged. And it is in such twilight that we all must be most aware of the danger in the air, however slight, lest we become uninvited victims of the darkness. And this is where we have it is at the group level. We were talking last night about the service concepts and how it assigns the responsibility for the ultimate responsibility and authority for AA belongs to the AA groups. And we also mentioned that the second tradition says each group has a loving God. And so we may bring our own not so loving God in here, or a God that's distant, a God that... The God I brought in here was a little bitty guy that didn't have any horsepower. He was distant and he didn't care about me. I practiced the absence of God, not the presence of God. Didn't want to have anything to do with him. But the group conscience has a loving God. And when I came into these meetings and when we come in here, we're exposed to a loving God. No matter what kind of a God we bring in here, we're exposed to a loving God, and it makes all the difference. And so the groups are so important, are absolutely important. Step one has as its tradition honesty, telling the truth about what's going on and acknowledging the truth about what's going on. There is a title page and a table of contents in the book. I put it up here because at first he doesn't really tell us where we are in the steps. And they told me and pointed out to me that everything in the preface, the three forewords and the doctor's opinion, and the first three chapters are about step one. Step one. And chapter 4, we agnostics, is all about step 2. So if you're in chapter 4, you're talking step 2. And if you're in the first three chapters, you're talking step 1. And finally, at 5 through 7, he tells you where you are and tells you it's steps 3 through 12, and he labels it. And then, of course, the last chapters, to the wives, the family afterwards, to employers, a vision for you, is all about how to practice these principles in all of our affairs. That's that whole catch at the last part before you get to the personal stories. And I might say one more thing. I had, there's always, my sponsor is Clancy, and my sponsor has a bunch of people over to his place every Saturday. They call it the yard, and there's all kinds of stuff going on about, oh, don't go over the yard, he makes you clean it all up and pick up dog crap and everything like that. You don't want to be going over there. That's not AA. On page 160 in this book, I'll just read a couple of excerpts from pages 160 and 161. One man and his wife placed their large home at the disposal of this strangely assorted crowd. Many a man yet days from his hospital experience has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Many an alcoholic who entered there came away with an answer. The stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place conspired to let him know that here was haven at last. Now this house will hardly accommodate its weekly visitors, for they number 60 or 80 as a rule. Alcoholics are being attracted from far and near, from surrounding towns. Family drive long distances to be present. No one is too discredited or is sunk too low to be welcomed cordially if he means business. Social distinctions, petty rivalries, and jealousies, these are laughed out of countenance. Being wrecked in the same vessel, being restored and united under one God, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others. The things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they? And that's the feeling I get here, from the guys that have driven a ways to be here, to the people right here in town, to what's going on. There's a family. There's a family here. And there's an important start to a tradition in this weekend that'll undoubtedly be with us for quite a while, and I'm glad to be here. The key to, when they had me, here's what they did. When finally I turned my attention to the steps, when they told me, son, this guy said he would take me through the steps. He said, get a brand new hardbound copy of the big book, because you're going to be writing in it. You're going to be, and don't be grabbing that ratty old thing out of the closet that you threw back there. Get a new one. Get a new one, and you're going to be writing in it. You're going to be making notes in it. You're going to create a document that is going to allow you to pass this on to the next person. Read the first 164 pages. Make the assumption that it applies to you today. Make the assumption that everything in there is true. Make the assumption that there are no answers in the big book. There are questions in the big book. And you have your own answers, and we'll help you find them. And if you, at the end of 164 pages, decide you want to do exactly what those guys did, then call me and we'll do that. You're the lab rat. I'm the lab rat. These guys claim they did this and got these results. You can find out. If you do exactly what they did, you'll know whether they were lying about it or not. Well, I like that. They took me to page 52. We call them the bedevilments. They say, the booze has been taken out of your life for quite a while. You didn't have anything to do with it. The obsession was just lifted. Like Wilson says in Bill's story, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. He doesn't say I quit. He just said I was separated from alcohol for the last time. And you were separated, they told me, and that obsession was lifted, and we know it was lifted because you would be drinking if it weren't lifted. They said in 23 years you've surely been crazy enough to drink. You've surely been angry enough to drink. You've surely been arrogant enough to drink, and you never drank. And you didn't do that. And you missed that miracle in your life. But there's still something else wrong with you. There is something else the matter with you. And it's been driving you crazy and resulted in a loss of a lot of stuff that you did not need to lose. And he said the test for current untreated alcoholism is at page 52. They asked me these questions. We were having trouble with personal relationships. They said, Hodges, you having any trouble with personal relationships? Oh, man. We couldn't control our emotional natures. I said, yeah, I get pretty angry. And it isn't just that, they said. Can you sit in that chair right there and bring about the same emotions for yourself that alcohol used to bring about when it worked? No, I can't. No. I seem to just have all this upset on me. He said, we were a prey to misery. Are you a victim to misery? Yeah. Victim to depression? Yeah. Couldn't make a living? Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. That practice was gone. We had a feeling of uselessness. Yeah, I did. We were full of fear. Oh boy. We were unhappy, and we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Yeah. And they said, you might as well add a 10th one. We'll just write it in for you because you got to get there sooner or later. Put down their sane sex life. Oh boy. Okay. All right. They said, now that's 10 areas. Test for current untreated alcoholism. I got 100 on the little test. Isn't that nice? Qualified 100% in every area. And I was only 23 years sober. Doing good. And it wasn't that, it's not that we don't try. I've been trying since I was 5 years old. And I found out at 5 years old I'm not big enough for this life. I'm just not big enough. I can't get the family back together. I can't get my dad to stay home. I can't get my mom to calm down. I can't. They do all kind of things. Up until I was 5, I adored my mother. She'd tuck me in at night and we'd whisper our little prayers and we had the best time. I guess I was about 4. And then toward the end of that year she said she was going to bring a baby home from the hospital. And I'm fine. Hey, okay with me. Knock yourself out. And she did. And then she started spending a lot of time with that baby. And we didn't have any time to... You're not going to believe this, and I don't want this to go out of the room, but they even had a little room set aside for this kid. In her own bed. And she'd be in there all the time with that thing. And the weeks went by, and it was... One day it came to me, they intend to keep this kid. And she'd bump me out of my deal with my mom. And I'd go in there and try to encourage her to move, basically. I'd give her a little thump on the head, and my mom caught me at that, and she picked me up bodily and threw me right out of that room. And before I hit the wall in the hallway, I knew she didn't love me. And I felt so foolish because I thought she loved me. I thought she adored me like I adored her. And the poor woman was just scared to death and like, what the hell do I have on my hands here with this kid? But now my point of view, she didn't love me. And she betrayed me. And things got a little rich around our house after that. You don't love me? I don't love you either. And so there was this sense of a loss of power. And I didn't know that when I came here. I didn't know that when I was 23 years sober. That stuff comes out of doing an inventory. That stuff comes out of a very interesting process that he describes in the 12 and 12 in chapter 8. He says, though in some cases, and this is on page 79 in the 12 and 12, though in some cases we cannot make restitution at all, and in some cases action ought to be deferred, we should nevertheless make an accurate and really exhaustive survey of our past life as it has affected other people. In many instances we shall find that though the harm done others has not been great, the emotional harm we've done ourselves has. Very deep, sometimes quite forgotten. Damaging emotional conflicts persist below the level of consciousness. At the time of these occurrences, they may actually have given our emotions violent twists, which have since discolored our personalities and altered our lives for the worse. And that had certainly happened to everybody in this room at one point or another, whether we have that sense of it or not. And we don't really get a feel for it until we turn our attention to this simple process that he has here. In any case, I think that the sense of a loss of power was very much with me at that age. And so I know I'm not enough, I'm not big enough for this world. It got to be about, I'm a power seeker. I want power. And I don't have quite enough. And so maybe me and the money I can steal out of my grandma's jar for missionaries would be enough. Maybe me and the lie I can tell. Maybe me and the candy I can boost out of the store and give to the other kids. Maybe that's going. Maybe me and this and that. And when I was 16, after a football game at a party, I began to drink vodka, and that was it. That was it. Me and the booze is going to make me big enough for this world, because otherwise I do not have any power. It's going to take. I'm not big enough for this life, and that is a bad deal for an alcoholic. That is a bad deal, because we want the power. Lack of power wouldn't be a dilemma if we didn't dig power. You know, there's some people don't care much about power, but none of them sitting in this room. We like the power. And we work out little ways in AA meeting, you know, to get it. To get it. All you have to do is go to a general service meeting, watch that fun stuff go on. Or in any meeting, you know. It isn't just that. And so I didn't have any power, and I wasn't even aware of that. You know, I'm just kind of bumping through life. And now I'm angry. And now I've got a point to prove. And that they've done me in, that they've treated me badly. And my conduct got very colorful. And I set about to try to embarrass my mother. But I don't have enough power. And all of that. And I got another problem. I've got these old ideas, and this one that I mentioned, and the old idea that comes out of that is basically you can't trust important women in your life. Can't trust them. I had no idea how that would haunt me. I had no idea how important. I'll tell you a story that began to wake me up to this, and we're really talking more about step 4, but it has some bearing here. A guy that I knew in Orange County when I lived down there, a guy that had moved up to the Silicon Valley near San Jose, a guy that was very gifted with computers named Billy, had come back into town, and he called me and he came over to the house and we talked. We had some fun. Billy told me he had been offered a new promotion with his company. They were going to give him a car, they were going to give him a staff, some people and he was going to, instead of going out into the clients, instead of working on the equipment in the office, he was going to go out and work on these big systems in the clients' factories. It was a nice promotion. And I said, that's so great. When are you going to start? He said, I can't take it. I said, you can't take what? He said, I can't take the job. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, they want me to get my hair cut. He had hair that was, and it was no longer really the style to have all that long hair. But he had long hair. Always since I'd known him. I said, well, cut your hair. What the hell is that? Cut it. He said, they don't have any right to make me do that. I used to think that meant the guy was hard of hearing and I'd start screaming at him, but I'm wiser now and gentler, and and I knew that what I was hearing wasn't it. You know what I mean? It just like, no, that's not it. But I let it go, and we talked about something else, and after a while I said, Billy, let's talk about that hair of yours. And it was kind of the same thing. And then finally, after I came back to it a third time that afternoon in my home in Los Angeles, I said, tell me what's going on. And he said something he'd never said to me or to anybody to my knowledge. He said, my ears are badly deformed. And I said, oh. He said, I can't get a haircut and then go out in the territory. I said, yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Do they know that? He said, no, I've never told anybody. After a while I said, Billy, let me see your ears. And he said, okay. And he finally, he loves me and he trusts me, and he brushed aside his hair, and I said, let me see the other one, and he did. And the sight I saw was amazing, because his ears looked like my ears. I said, Billy, those aren't beauties, but they're not deformed. I had a mirror in the den where we were, and we got up and we're looking in the mirror now, and he says, yeah, but they're so big. And I got a little tape ruler out of and I'm going, now we're comparing our ears and measuring them, you know. And he slowly begins to get it. That I said, that's an old idea. Where'd you get that old idea? And he said, like any good alcoholic, he said, I don't know. Okay, good, we're making progress. I said, how does it make you feel? That's a good question. How does it make you feel? He knows the answer to that. He said, it makes me feel like a clown. I said, what do people do with... He said, they laugh at him. I said, yeah. So you can't cut your hair? He said, yeah. I said, what if it isn't true? And he looked again, and he looked again. I said, when was the very first time you felt like that? And he remembered that. We do remember that. He was coming home from school. He was in the second grade. He felt great. He ran into the house. He knew he'd see his mom. She'd give him a cookie, send him out to play. And he went running in the house, and his mom was on the phone. And he heard his mother look at him and say, and she got a weird look on her face, and in the phone she said, Betty, I got to hang up now. Little Billy just came running in, and little pictures have big ears. And he never asked what that means. He didn't ask that means kids hear everything and repeat it. And he'd been kidded about his ears before, and saw that weird look on her face. And as soon as he could grow his hair long, he did that. And then forgot why his hair was long, except that he had to keep it long, and nobody dare ask him not to do that. And we started laughing, and we started crying, and we started hooping and hollering and having a big time. And it took him about a week to get a haircut, but he got 3 haircuts. He learned, you know. And he's kicking butt in the Silicon Valley today. And I thought, wow. Old ideas. It's part of the problem, because I don't have any power. I got a mind that lacks proportion and can't think straight. It says that on page 37. One day I was with a gal. We'd been going together. I was in San Francisco. I called down to Los Angeles. We got in a tense conversation. She hung up on me. I wanted to kill her. She's got to die. There's a mind that lacks proportion and can't think straight. That's not a good defense to a charge of murder, you know. She hung up on me, Your Honor. Or like we were talking last night, somebody comes into my lane on the freeway. So I got some old ideas, and I got a mind that lacks proportion and can't think straight, and I got an ego. And my ego is not my friend. My ego is, it becomes a trusted friend, but we have to, when we start this process, our ego is such that we really have a heck of a time with it. There's a book called Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, as you know, and in one of the appendices, a guy by the name of Dr. Tebow gives a little talk about ego, and it's very interesting, and it's part of the process. And he says this on page 311 of that book, Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. Despite most reports to the contrary, there is a growing recognition of certain common qualities regularly present in alcoholics. Characteristic of the so-called typical alcoholic is a narcissistic, egocentric core dominated by feelings of omnipotence, intent at maintaining at all costs its inner integrity. Meaning, however I have it wired up, that's the gospel, and we're going to keep it that way and don't interfere with it. While these characteristics are found in other maladjustments, they appear in relatively pure culture in alcoholic after alcoholic. One researcher recently reported he felt he could discern the outlines of a common character structure among problem drinkers, and that the best terms he could find for the group of qualities noted was defiant individuality and grandiosity. There's a ring to that, isn't there? In my opinion, he says, these words were actually accurately chosen. Inwardly, the alcoholic brooks no control from man or God. He, the alcoholic, is and must be the master of his destiny. He will fight to the end to preserve that position. That ego will kick me all over town. Adopt a stupid position and defend it to the bitter end. And that's what my ego serves up. So I got these old ideas that I don't even know I have. I have a mind that's a little out, and I got an ego that's running my life. Taken together, those are all three problems. So if we were to diagram out step one, we'd say that it's like powerless, and the bodily problem, of course, is we're powerless over booze, and once we introduce an ounce of alcohol into our system, a very colorful thing takes over and we're gone. We're not going to talk about that because the obsession has been relieved and we're not doing that anymore. But there is a problem here. We're also powerless mentally, and that is because of at least these three things. Our ego, that'll have us adopt a stupid position and defend it till the bitter end. Our old ideas that were formed like Billy's ears, or my notion you can't trust important women in your life, and the fact that my mind is out, lacks proportion, can't think straight. And you know, the interesting thing about it is that when it's my old idea, it doesn't seem like an old idea. It just seems like that's the way that it is. And when it's my mind that's out, the only way I have to check it is with my mind, which lacks proportion and can't think straight. So there's a little circularity there that has me saying, yeah, the problem's out there. Always the problem is out there. If you'll shape up, I'll feel better. But if the problem's out there, I don't have an answer. That's what you've taught me. If the problem is out there, I am without an answer. Is it really the person in the next lane? Is it really the elevator operator? Is it really the waitress? So I got all of that going on. This mental thing taken together, these three areas, give me another problem, and that is there is a spiritual deficit, there's an unmanageability. And that unmanageability is simply a spiritual deficit. I don't have any power. I have no power. And I don't know that. And I think my job is this. First of all, to keep you from finding out that I don't have any power. I've got to do that. Secondly, I've got to find some power that will fill in that terrible gap. And third, I have to live through that power. My power added in there from stealing or lying or drinking or whatever. And those things taken in combination create an unmanageable life. There's a horrible spiritual deficit attached to that. And the reason I never got enrolled into the solution in Alcoholics Anonymous for all that time is I never got the problem. If I don't have the problem, I'm never going to buy the solution. Never. Anybody in sales knows that. This guy's not a prospect. He's not likely to purchase what you have to offer. And I couldn't buy it. Oh, I bought the unity and I bought the service, but I couldn't buy the recovery. Didn't inquire about it because I didn't get it. And I had a lot of opportunities to get it. I'd been married twice drinking and twice sober, and now this latest arrangement was on its way out the door, and the business was on its way out the door, and the house was gone, and I don't know, and my image is gone, and I'm finally beginning to get that my life is unmanageable, that I never will. Because, one of the great things about acquiring stuff is that you find out that the acquisition of that stuff does not take you where you want to go. It won't stay. For a moment it brings you what you think you're after, but that doesn't stay. And the light begins to come on a little bit. An awakening begins to take place. And we were laughing last night about that guy under the bridge, but we hate to wake up. We have all kind of fantasies about that. And this is the thing that, see, Silkworth says we need an entire psychic change. That means a new mind. I cannot sprinkle enough Prozac on that old puppy to make a difference. You know what I mean? I need a new mind. Cannot do it. Oh, I'd like to take a pill and have all that go away. But then that was my answer all my life. Chemical peace of mind. Now I'm stuck in sobriety. The obsession's gone. And I'm living in an unmanageable skin. And I finally, because these guys took time with me, got it in this marvelously rich language of the book. He says this. Here's something that shocked me at page 25. Shocked me. He says, when you see drinking here, just translate it into thinking. If you're as serious an alcoholic as we are, we believe there's no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, and we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, which I'd been doing, and the other is to accept spiritual help. Now those are terribly remote notions out here. I can lay around on the floor in the shed barking like a fox, but if I do anything about my spiritual life, God's going to send me to China to be a missionary like He did my uncle. And what's the problem? Well, if I'm throwing up in the garage, the shed. See how that works its way back in there. It's still in there. Trying to be a big shot. I don't have any control over what's going on when I'm in that state. But if I turn my will and my life over to the care of God, I don't have any control. And my ego says, do not pass that way. Don't go there. Don't go there. Either way. And so what do? I look for the middle ground. And what's the middle ground? Getting involved in unity, getting involved in service, working with newcomers, prayer. I don't want to accept spiritual help, but I will ask for it. You know what I mean? God, help me be more effective with the newcomer. And then the phone rings, And it's a new guy on the phone. Not now, I'm praying. I'm praying. I'm always after that middle ground. There's another statement in here in the first couple of chapters that says, in effect, if a better recovery program, it says if a better philosophy of life, which can be stated a better recovery program, or more principles were involved in our lives, many of us would have recovered long ago. So basically it says, if I can get to the right group, or if I can talk about these principles and think about a moral life, I'm out of danger. When the book says, if that worked, many of us would have recovered long ago. But that stuff, and I always liked that group over there, and I was 12 years over in the yard every Saturday, and had a wonderful time and relived my childhood and learned how to do a lot of stuff there. But it didn't take me to a relationship with God because I didn't want one. And talk about these principles all I want, have these moral convictions and impose them with all my might. But the needed power wasn't there. And what I didn't know was that the power was not ever going to be my power. And then the next kick up, when you really get thinking like I got to do something, is okay, all right, I get it that I won't have any power. Give me your power. I'll tap into your power, God. And I want a line of credit, basically. I want power that I can use to manage my life. I'll write this line of credit down the way I want to write it down. Give me the power to, kill that guy in the group I don't like. And it isn't even that. The shocking news to me was, I'm not going to be able to tap into power that I can use to manage my life. I'm going to tap into power that will manage my life. And now my ego's going, oh man, are you kidding? You are going to be some kind of wimp, I'll tell you that. You got that do-gooder thing. You might as well go to China right now. What the hell are you doing here? Get back to Billings and pass out religious tracts on the streets. That's what you ought to be doing. You kidding, thinking about law school? Come on, shape up. Here it is on page 44. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. If a better AA program or recovery program or just the AA principles were going to get the job done, it means I don't really need to go out anywhere else to get my power. Not all the power I need. But I've known since I was 5 I don't have that and tried to disguise that. Step 1 is a brutal kind of a thing because it requires that I really get, not just that my life is unmanageable, because I was constantly trying to get it manageable. And every time I got I'm trying big cases downtown, name in the paper, crap, big paychecks come in. I had a high burn rate, so they disappeared fast, Suddenly all of that is gone. All of it is gone. And I'm in a lot of trouble. The only thing that was left was a car I didn't much care about, and the burn rate was still there. And I sat with some guys in Little Rock 3 or 4 months later. Guys like Pritz, a guy named Joe, some other people. Sat up till 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning in the room of one of these guys that were all there back there at that convention. 2 things happened there. I found out that there was something that I had never tried in Alcoholics Anonymous. Another thing that was funny, I had never forgotten it, the headline comedian that night said something that I thought was cute. He said he didn't get married anymore. What he does now, every 5 years he goes out and finds a woman he hates and he buys her a house. I thought, well, there's an efficiency to that, it saves a lot of trouble. there is then this whole thing about step one, and until I get the unmanageability of my life, the value of the rest of the program is lost to me. There would be no point in doing any of the other stuff. And I have a particular kind of insanity with all of that, you know, a brain that's out, these old ideas by which I live these old ideas that I just picked up without any analysis. I picked them up by a pre-logical mind. I picked them up in a home where there was a lot of drinking, a lot of violence. My mother got very angry after that time, and you don't ask questions. You just don't, because you don't like the answer. Because God says so. Boom. That's why. Anything else, son? Boom. No. That's all. Thanks. Thanks for sharing. I'm so grateful. Been nice talking to you. But we don't know. You know, we don't know. And it's funny because I got angry at my parents. And any kid that's angry at his parents, I have a twin brother in Portland that went through that same thing. I have a little sister in Denver who took her hits. My younger brother, 12 years younger than me, his path was not alcoholism, but he wound up pushing a cart in Atlanta, a grocery cart with all his belongings in it, and then died about 3 years ago. Angry, embittered, a point to prove. You know the point, we know we're the little advertisement running around about whether our folks did a good job with us. And our lives either become a thank you to our parents or a screw you to our parents. And mine became the latter. I mean, it seemed to be at some level important to me for everybody in the world that might be watching to get that my folks screwed up. I couldn't come and tell you. See? If you got a minute, I'd like to tell you how mean my mother was. They don't want to hear that. But I can show them, because you know why? I'm living in a shed. If my dad had done a good job, would I be here? You know, it's sort of the message in some weird way. And we hang on to that and hang on to that, and I can't love you because you know what? I'd like to. You seem like a nice person. But I didn't get mine. When I get mine, we'll talk again. And it leaves us doing what somebody described as circling the drain. Circling the drain. And that's why I didn't want to end on this note last night. It's not a happy note. But we'll take a break and come back in 15 minutes and see if there's not some way out of this mess. Give it a minute of silence, just so our minds get that we're going to do something else here. And we'll do the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right. We're in, that's about all the time we can give step one. We're going to move into step two. We're going to go into chapter 4, which is We Agnostics. I will tell you that there are a couple of assignments in chapter 4 that were very fascinating to me. First of all, the step is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And if you've done a careful analysis of step 1 and learned the things about yourself that they forced me to look at, you realize that the question of being restored to sanity is not an odd question as I thought it was. The implication is that I'm insane, and I wasn't real happy with that implication, but they asked me to make a list of all the craziest things that I had ever done in my life. And I came back to them with my list. And I have the same list that you do. First time I went to jail, I got arrested off the fire escape at the Tri-Delt sorority house at the University of Oregon about midnight. And it was you know, it really wasn't my fault. I had been drinking in a beer bar off campus. I was a student there, and there was a very pretty girl in the beer bar in this tavern, and she almost looked at me, so I felt we had a future together. And so I drank a little more, and then she was gone, and then I found out she lived in the Delta sorority house. So I was on my way up that fire escape to discuss our future, basically, and the house mother's going crazy, and the cops pull me off of that thing, and I spend that night in jail. So I wrote that down, and then I was at the dental school there at the University of Oregon for a couple of years. Not a real good place for a guy like me to be, and they threw me out at the end of my second year. But we had a clinic on Saturday morning, and I get drunk on Friday night. And then on Saturday morning, I'll drop a couple of 15 milligram spansules of Dexamil and wake up and drink some coffee and then go down in the clinic. And it gives you kind of a fine tremor. And the hangover is there anyway. And they just come out with that new high-speed air-driven handpiece. And you could take a quadrant of teeth out just twitching. And they don't like to hear you say whoops when you're in there screwing around. And I stayed there in that insanity for 2 years, and they had to throw me out. I didn't know I didn't belong there. I told my dad one day, he said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I don't know how old I was, but I said, "I think I'll be a dentist." And he didn't hit me, so I thought, well, that's what I'll do, you know. I drank on Skid Row. After that, waiting to go in the Marine Corps, I got into ferments. Skid Row in Portland is Burnside Street in those days. I came out of a blackout in one of these places. They're lit about as romantically as this room, and they have these little wooden tables and a lot of Native Americans that are my favorite people to drink with. I love the way they drink. And because they don't ask any questions like, how you doing? You know, it doesn't come up. Everybody knows what they're there for. They called those places cafes because they had the pickled pig's feet. Maybe they had nothing else, anything like food in there, except some green eggs. You know. I came out of a blackout at a little table in one of those joints, and I was sitting across the table from some gal, and I don't know where we met, but I had that funny feeling we were together. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where we'd met. I didn't know the nature of our relationship. I had no idea. She was there with her things in paper bags, so I knew we were traveling. And she had some chili on her cheek, so I knew we'd had dinner. Some delicate flower I'd invited to dine that night. There's a line in one of the personal stories that says, "Somehow I got out of there." And that's sort of my story, you know. And then I'm in the Marine Corps, and so I wrote this stuff down, and I'm in the Marine Corps, and the general down at El Toro said to me, and I was in his office at attention getting a letter of reprimand. I had a great job. I was an instructor at the NCO Leadership School. And I loved that job, and I loved the Marine Corps. I loved it. But I can't pack the gear. And I'm getting a letter of reprimand. I've already had one. And there was a board of inquiry coming up. And this 2-star general said to me, before he dismissed me, he said, "You know, there isn't any room in the Marine Corps for an alcoholic, Lieutenant." And I couldn't believe that he would say that to me. God, what kind of judgment does a man have that would think I'm alcoholic? Well, that's our nation's defense. And what if the Russians come and this guy, he thinks I'm alcoholic? My brass is polished, my shoes are shined, my clean uniform. And when he dismissed me out of his office, I knew he was crazy. I knew I was an alcoholic. And I knew I needed a drink more than anything else that morning. And I went out in the orange groves and drank a bottle of vodka. And I got out of the Marine Corps by the skin of my teeth, and I was able, after sobriety, to stay in the reserves and do it right, for which I'm very grateful. Got promoted to captain, which astonished anybody that watched me drink on active duty. But it was insanity like that, trying to quit drinking. Insanity. Moving to Glendale, the last arrest I had for drunk driving before the car went away was the light was red and I stopped and the light turned green. It was about 10 in the morning and I'd had a few drinks, but not enough, and I'm going for a real drink. The light turned amber and red and green and amber, and I'm resting. I'm kind of gathering and the guy right behind me is in a squad car, and he has me out of the car after a while. And they say things like, "You're under arrest." There's a lot of power in that life, isn't there? You're under arrest. I want a jury trial. I always wanted a jury trial. But the police report was interesting, and I wrote this down. He said, "I discontinued the field sobriety test because the suspect was injuring himself." That's on the police report. And I'm going, gee. And then I'm in the shed. So I take my list back to this guy, because we're bickering over sanity. And he said, "There's a lot of crazy stuff on this list." I said, yeah, there is. He said, "A lot of drinking." Yeah. I mean, it included that night that I told that gal a gal I didn't know, but I was trying to impress her in a bar. She said, "Why are you drinking so much?" And I was living at home with my wife and youngest son. I said, "I'm drinking a lot because my wife was killed not long ago in a car wreck." And you wake up in the morning and you go, "How the hell could you say that?" Insane stuff. So the guy says, "A lot of craziness on your list." I said, "Yeah." He said, "But you didn't write down the craziest thing you ever did." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "And you did it all the time, and you did it before you started drinking. You did it from a dry brain every time you did it." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Every time you got drunk, there was a period of not drinking, and then a thought, with all this evidence you should never drink again, your thought is, I should have another drink." That's crazy. That's crazy. And you brought that mind into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I began to kind of get it. That taken together, all of this stuff going on, I really have a mind that isn't going to get the job done. It works in areas where I have my crap together, but nowhere else. My ego is not too big of a mess in that. But anyway, he said, "You've already answered all these bedevilment questions. Yeah, you're unhappy, can't seem to be real help to other people. You prey to misery, prey to depression." He said, "You really need a vision of sanity. What would sanity look like in your life in each of these areas if God removed the problem? What would that look like?" Because he said, if you can form at step 2 a vision of sanity, and if you can work the steps through step 9, by the time you get halfway through step 9, you will have no more and no less in your life than the vision of sanity that you form at step 2. So that's just the way a mind works. That's just the way that it works. It's so fascinating to look and compare the two. The promises at step 9 and the problems as they're described at step 2 in that bedevilment thing. Somebody gave me some kind of a workup on that. I'll get to that in a little bit. But the amazing promise that this guy made to me was that if I can, at step 2, from those bedevilments on page 52, form a vision of sanity for myself, I will have no more and no less than that same vision in my life at step 9. And he says at step 10, don't forget, it says every day is our day to carry our vision of God's will into our daily activities. My vision. Is it God's will for me? Oh, I don't know. But it's my vision of what it would be. And he said that's important to get that. That these steps not only give you peace, but they move you. We're talking travel here. We're talking broad highway. We're talking a journey, which is nothing but a day's trip. He said we're talking recovery. Look these words up in the dictionary. You know, when you go to the dictionary and look up the word recovery, it means, among other things, the extraction of something precious out of that which appears to have no value. Recovery, iron ore is recovered. The extraction of gold, something precious out of that which appears to have no value. That's recovery. That's recovery. And there's something sweet about it. And it isn't about not drinking anymore. That's handled, providing we pay attention to certain little daily things. But what am I going to do about that part of me that's still out? And so I formed a vision of sanity. I said, all right, let's look at that, page 52. Here's how it would go for me. He said, we were having trouble with personal relationships. What would sanity look like for me? And it was simpler than I thought after I gave it some thought. Well, I'd be safe to be with. I'd be safe. What does safe mean? Well, I'd tell the truth, keep my promises. That's not complex stuff. If God removed the problem of being in trouble with personal relationships, I'd be safe to be with. I'm somebody with whom someone could, with a sense of trust and safety, hang out. Whether a lover, a wife, a good friend, a baby, it's not complex. And I'll tell you something. In my heart of hearts, I always wanted to be safe to be with. And I never was. Never was. And I wanted that. It's a vision. Sort of like I'm in the life raft in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and I got one oar, and I'm just like working like hell, and nothing, going around in circles, circling the drain. And he said, you can't do that anymore. You grab the shirt and you put it on the oar and you stick it up and tap into real power. That gets you moving. Not your deal. No. That oar just gives you the illusion of power, because it ain't taking you anywhere. And then you have to decide, where do I want to go? Seattle? Long Beach? San Diego? Honolulu? It's up to you. You can decide whatever you want. And the beginning of the decision of where I want to go is what I want to be. And what do I want to be? That decision is, what would my life look like in these areas if God removed the problem? What would it look like? I couldn't control my emotional natures. You know, there's a safe and clean and respectful way to express anger. I didn't know that. I had no idea that I could do that without hurting other people. That it was a sweet way to go. Because we're going to have that. It isn't that the anger goes away. It isn't that we're with people that never get angry. But there's a way to be with that. Because when I'm a kid, anger is terrifying. Somebody always gets smacked real good. And there's no explanation for it. It's just whack. And that's the end of the discussion. I was a victim to misery. What does that mean? I am overpowered by, I have no sense of well-being. What would it look like if the problem were removed? Well, I would have a sense of well-being in my life. Victim to depression, what does that mean? I shove it down, and then it explodes. But what if, instead of that, I could express whatever's going on, good and bad, and not be a victim of that? What would it look like? It would look like that I'm fully expressive of what's going on. You know, it's hard to really be with somebody when you don't tell them what's going on. Nobody likes that. Oh, I don't want to make demands. You know, the most demanding people in the world are the ones not that are bitching all the time, but just waiting till you guess what I want and give it to me. Oh, they're pain. Very demanding, very nasty. I kind of like the way I do them. No extra charge for that. That's all with it. We couldn't make a living. Well, I'd have abundance in my life and share it with other people. Abundance. My creditors would be happy. We had a feeling of uselessness. Well, I'd not only be useful, but know it. Full of fear. What's the opposite of fear? Love. 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 We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. I'd be useful. Sane sex life. What does that mean? You know, in these areas where I don't have any power, where she has the power, she's the gatekeeper, yes, no power over an important part of my life, and there's sexual tension, how am I going to treat that person? Am I going to pout? Am I going to sulk? Am I going to be gracious? Am I going to be a friend? Am I going to be respectful? How does all that go? What does sanity in that area look like? It isn't about anything so much as how am I dealing in areas where there's sexual tension? Am I appropriate? Am I over flirtatious? Am I disloyal to my wife? If my wife and I are in an area of sexual tension, how kind am I? How loving am I? That. The whole thing addresses power. You know, we get up into that, well, I'll wait till we get to the inventory about that, but power and lack of it is all through that. So that was a now I have a vision of sanity for myself. Yours will be different. Yours will be different. But the promises tell me that vision will be met. Before we are halfway through with this stage of our development at step 9, we will be amazed. Now they hook it up. You decide at step 2. And get your seatbelt fastened, because when you get to step 9, you're going to see some stuff. Okay. I was so intrigued by that woman that was in the newspapers recently, because she had started something called managed moderation. Oh, God. AA had let her down by not explaining you could drink moderately. And I was so sad for her, because she killed 2 people. And we all know how that would be, waking up in that drunk tank and finding out why you're there. I felt so bad for her, and I also know AA never let me down. Not once. Never did. When that guy told me these promises and how they would show up again if I could get my sleeves rolled up, I took a chance. Risk disappointment? Sure. But I was living disappointment every day of my life. What the hell is the risk all about? Yeah. So that was one exercise they had me do. There was another one, and that was this. It says on page 47, do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. He said, take those 18 or so spiritual terms in chapter 4. I said, which one are those? And they said, the capitalized terms. Just take the capitalized terms, assume they're spiritual terms, set aside any prejudice you may have against them, and ask yourself what they honestly mean to you. Because I grew up, as I already told you, in this what I considered an oppressive religious atmosphere. My uncle went down and they sent him to China to be a missionary, and you got to be saved, and people would come in with the most unlikely stories, and there were a lot of whippings around that, and I didn't ever think it was a good thing. And I bristled. I so bristled with that whole idea. And I had never read chapter 4 because I didn't think I was an agnostic. We agnostics, next, go to the next chapter. Might as well have been we Ethiopians. I wouldn't. Nah, it doesn't apply to me. So they said, all right, pick a spiritual term. Let's say creative intelligence. Do I have a prejudice against that term? Not really. All right, what does that term mean to me? Not in my ego, not looking it up in the dictionary, not in my mind, but way down underneath that. It acknowledges that there is a creator, and that creator has intelligence, real intelligence. That creative mind is quite something. And I wrote a little something about that. I went through all of these terms. What does all-powerful creative guiding intelligence mean? And that a presence of God, what does that mean? Spirit of the universe, the new land, God of reason. Those kinds of terms are sprinkled throughout chapter 4. They said just take them. Set aside prejudice you might have against the term and define the term. And I came back with my definitions, and I had discovered that while they at first were kind of intellectual, they deepened as I went through this exercise. And he looked at them and he said, okay. And then he took me to the next sentence. He said, at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. I was launched to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Now I know that there is something in me that has a definition, that these terms mean something outside of what they mean to you, outside of what the church says, outside of any biblical teaching I may have had. I have something in me that responds to this. And it's good to know that, because it's the first step away from dismissal of the whole thing, because I don't want to, those prayers when you're a little kid, now I lay me down to, isn't that if I should die before I wake, that'll keep you awake. Just the hell is that? None of it worked for me. None of it. But I was angry, and of course I didn't want it to work. There is another very interesting exercise in here. Page 53. The question I could never quite get to. On page 53, it says this. And we got to this part of chapter 4, and we're in step 2, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And on page 53, he just threads the needle with this question. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else He is nothing. God either is or He isn't. What is our choice to be? And they asked me, what's your choice? Is God everything or nothing? Can I get back to you? No, we want to know. What's your choice? Well, I know He isn't nothing, but I don't think He's everything He's cracked up to be. I said, okay, good. You're telling the truth. You're telling the truth. A glib answer, oh, He's everything, when you don't believe it, is big trouble coming up. And so they said, you've been way overeducated. We're going to make it easy for you. Do this. Make a list of the 5 things you will not give up for a better relationship with God. Oh, I got 5 things. Oh, you bet I do. 5 things. So, we'll put up here, let's put up here anger, just to start out safe. I don't want to give up my anger for a better... Why? Because I get something out of it. I can keep you at bay with my anger. I can punish you with my anger. I can control you. I don't want to give up control. What else? I don't want to give up sex. I don't want to have it less important. This is really the issue here. What 5 things are more important to you than a better relationship with God? Sex, lust, greed, We got that old greed and groin thing going on. Sounds like a dinner house down the street, doesn't it? Let's go to the greed and groin for dinner. All I want to do is make enough money so I don't have to trust God. Or if I win the lottery, my life will become manageable in some way. What else was there? I don't want to give up my career. And I don't want to give up. I had 7 things, and I think it was these 7. The last one was image. And so they said, great. Great. So now we know that God is not nothing, and now we know that He's number 8 on a list of 8. Is that the idea? I said, yeah. Yeah. They said, that's really good information, because in a while we're going to ask you to make a decision and turn your will and your life over to the care of number 8 on a list of 8, basically. You think you're going to be able to do that? No. No. Never going to happen. Why? And what's going on here? Here's number 8. What's the problem? The problem is that where am I going for my power? I'm going to the first 7. There is one who has all power. Am I believing that? No. No. Because I'm still experimenting here. Page 12 at the bottom. What do I need when I feel out of power?